Hey guys, welcome back to How to Roll Dice. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be doing a quick little review and walkthrough of this game here, Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, which we only recently played for the first time, even though I've owned it for a few months because we just haven't gotten around to it, is actually a pretty unique and beautiful game as far as its visuals go. As you can see here, it comes with all of these three-dimensional trees, which you sort of scissor together out of cardboard. And once you have a bunch of them laid out on the board sort of midway through the game, and obviously throughout the end of the game, it really starts to take on the look and feel of an actual three-dimensional, colorful forest. And it's really kind of nice to look at, especially if you have 4 players and you're really filling everything out. It's a very stunning game to kind of take in. As far as gameplay goes, it's a little mellow, and I don't really think there's a way you could be good at it other than properly managing your light points. But we'll get into that. So as far as materials go, obviously you get your trees. They're wonderful. You get 4 different sizes and 4 different colors. So I'll just try to mix those up for you here. This is a small tree. I'd say that's about 2 inches tall. Then you've got a medium tree here. That's about 3 inches tall. And then you've got a large tree here. That's probably about 4.5 inches tall. So it's got some good height to it. They really come off the board. It's not these little, plastic resin stacked tokens that kind of have some height to them, but you have to look at them from a really shallow angle. These are popping off of the board. These are three-dimensional trees, and it makes the game a lot of fun to look at, like I said. You've got the board itself. The board itself is a square board, but on the square board is a hexagon, and within the hexagon are circles. So lots of shapes going on. A lot of geometry this game, especially when it gets to how the sun moves, but we'll get into that. So this is the board itself, and you can see that it's got a hexagon and then a sort of grid of circles within that. And those circles are dotted with either 1, 2, 3, or 4 leaves. And the leaves sort of increase as you get closer to the center of the board, which is where the 4-leaf space is. And again, I'll get into why that is. You've got this lovely sun marker here. This is going to move around the board and let you know where the sun is during any given round, and it's got these faded arrows along the bottom edge of it that hopefully you'll be able to see. Those are to help you keep in mind which direction the sun's rays are going. So again, lots of visual components to this game. You've got the player boards themselves, or the player mats. These, much like the trees, are broken up into sort of 4 seasons, but it doesn't change the way that the trees play or that the player actually plays the game. It's just visual. It's very nice visual. You can see here, this is the winter board. Here's what I would call spring, summer, and fall. And even on the back, they have full art, which is very nice. They didn't have to do that. I mean, it costs extra money to print on the back of things. And it's not like you ever look at the back of the board, because once it's on the table, it's face down. I mean, it's, backside down the entire time. You've got your score tokens. That's these little stacks of chips right here. These are also marked with 1, 2, 3, or 4 leaves, and that's because you score more if you grow on a space with more leaves. And then on one side, you can see they sort of have a representation of the soil as well as the leaf marker. And then on the other side, they actually have their score value. You've got your player 1 marker. That's this right here. Basically the same image that's on the front of the box, but it's very nice. I actually like that artwork a lot, so it's kind of cool that that's what's on the player 1 token. You've got these sun markers here. These are numbered 1 through 4, and these are to keep track of what round of sun revolution rotation you're on, which isn't necessary as far as I'm concerned, because the sun only goes around the table 3 times or 4 times if you're playing the advanced version of the game, which is really just that the sun goes around the table a 4th time, which doesn't really change much. So it's not really hard to keep track of are you on cycle 1, 2, 3, or 4 if you're playing the advanced game. So I don't find these very necessary, but they come with the game, so why not? I also forgot to mention, you get these lovely little seed markers, seed tokens, which are also unique to the season that you're playing. So you've got acorns, you've got these little, we always call them helicopter things that fall out of trees and land in your driveway in the summer, and they're super annoying. So that's what you're going to get as far as what's in the box. Gameplay is super simple, and like I said, very relaxed and mellow and kind of just chill. But if you're looking for a cutthroat, tear your friends apart kind of game, I'm not quite sure you can turn this into that because of the mechanic of how the sun moves and shadows interacting with light points that you spend during the life cycle phase. It sounds complicated, but it's not. The entire rulebook is 3 pages. It's those 2 and this one, because that's really just the cover art, and it tells you what comes in the box and an introduction. and the name of the author and illustrator and stuff. So it's 3 pages worth of rules. I read them in about 5 minutes, and then I taught my friends in about 10 minutes, and then we played about an hour and a half long game, and it was a lot of fun. But I want to continue to reiterate, very mellow and relaxed. It's not fast-paced. It's kind of like watching trees grow. You've heard the saying, it's like watching grass grow. This is like watching trees grow, except you get points at the end of a tree growing. It's also funny, they went through a lot of effort to not say that when a tree reaches its end of life, you cut it down and sell it or harvest it and get money, i.e. victory points or score, for that tree. Instead, they just say, oh, the tree reaches the end of its life, remove it from the board, and you gain victory points. Like, obviously, the implication is that it was cut down because then you can plant a new tree in the spot that it was in. But they don't want to take this beautiful, majestic forest and turn it into a bunch of lumberjacks cutting trees down and dragging them through the mud. So they kind of just stayed away from that language in the rules. But anyways, play setup is very straightforward. Everybody's going to take a player board, or player mat, whatever you want to call it, and they're going to take the matching colored trees and seed tokens, and they're going to begin to place them on the board. So looking at the board here, you can see these sort of white circles or faded circles with X's in them. Those X's are meant to represent the sort of bottom base of the tree there. And so on your board, you can hold 2 large trees, 3 medium trees, 4 small trees, and 4 seeds. So you're going to take all of your stuff and you're going to begin placing it on your board in the appropriate spaces. So you've got your large trees, move this down a touch, you've got your large trees, your medium trees, your small trees, your seeds. And once you've put everything in its correct place, you'll notice that you still have things that don't fit on the board. You're going to have 3 more small trees, you're going to have a medium tree, and you're going to have 2 seeds that have nowhere to go. That's because that's your starting available sort of resources. The game has sort of a stepped process of moving trees or seeds onto the board, onto the play board, I should say. You start with them on your player mat. You have to then move them off of your player mat into your available area, and then you move them from your available area onto the player board. And at the same time, once you move something new onto the player board, often the thing that you're replacing it with, say for example a medium tree growing into a large tree, that medium tree has to go back to your player mat. So there's sort of a cyclical thing going on there, which makes sense in the concept of growing trees and, life cycles. So you've got your player board set up, you've got your leftover stuff in your sort of available pile. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your small tree, or one of your 3 small trees that you have in your available pile, starting with player 1, and you're going to place it somewhere along the outer edge of the board in those 1-leaf spaces. So say, for example, I place this tree here. We then move on to the next player and they place one of their trees, anywhere you like in the outer edge. Then we move on to the next player, they place one of theirs, and then the last player places one of theirs, and then we go around and do that same thing again. So each player will get a second small tree in the outer ring. And then we randomly place the sun marker. I suppose you could do that before you place trees, but I think we did it after. Place the sun marker so that it lines up with this little notch here in one of the corners of the hexagon, which are also sort of squared. And again, that's to show you the direction that the sun is coming at that point. So a round is basically each player gets to go through the 2 phases of the round, and then the sun moves. I'll get into that in a minute. So this is starting setup. Everybody's going to have 2 trees around the outside. You're going to have 1 small tree, 1 medium tree, and 2 seeds left over in your available stack, and your entire player board is going to be filled up with everything else. You're also going to have your sun point marker, or your light point marker, or solar marker, I forget what they call it, in the 0 space of your little light tracker stack over here that goes from 0 down to 20. That's basically the economy of the game, what you use to move stuff from your board to your ready, and from your ready onto the player board. So starting with the, I believe, youngest player, you're going to assign player 1 to somebody, which is this token here, and they are going to begin the very first photosynthesis phase. Photosynthesis phase is basically, you're going to determine how many light points you have for that round, and you determine that by looking at what trees you have on the board that are being struck by light and are not in the shadow of other trees, and also how big the trees that you have that are gaining light points are. So, in your starting setup, it's unlikely that any trees will be blocked. The way that you tell if a tree is blocked is, you've got 3 different size trees. You've got your small, your medium, and your large. A small tree casts a shadow 1 space. So for example, if the sun was going this way, like it is now, this tree would cast a shadow onto that tree, and this tree would not get any light points at this time. This tree, because it's a medium, would cast a shadow 2 spaces long and could block even, say, up to this medium tree, but it would obviously also block small trees in either orientation. If it were a larger tree, for example like this, that is not blocked. It would still block the tree next to it, but even though its shadow goes 2 spaces, it wouldn't block this tree because this tree is taller. A large tree casts a shadow 3 spaces. So it would block this one, it would block this one, and it would also block that one because it goes 3 spaces and that tree is not taller. It is the same size. So it's blocked by the shadow. None of these 3 trees at this point where the sun is at this angle would gain any light points during this photosynthesis round. Also, the number of light points that you get, because they like to stick with the number 3, which I kind of appreciate, is 1 light point if light is hitting your small tree, 2 light points if light is hitting your medium tree, or 3 light points if light is hitting your large tree. So it's pretty straightforward to calculate what you're going to be getting for light points during this starting round, because you've just got a bunch of small trees around the outer edge that probably aren't going to be blocking each other at this point. But it does get a little more complicated as the game goes forward. And this mechanic also creates the very difficult to master thing that I was talking about before, where I don't really think you could ever get good at this game. Because when you have all these trees eventually laid out on the board of different heights at different positions, scattered all over the place, and then keeping in mind that your trees can shadow your own trees. It's not like just because it's your tree, the sun somehow gets to it. Trees cast shadow on the trees behind them based off of their height. That's it. So your trees will block your own trees all the time. So you got the board that's sort of starting to look like this, and then the sun, every time you go to a new round, moves to the next corner of the hexagon. And so the shadows are constantly being cast in a different direction. And so when you're trying to place a new tree, it's almost impossible to try to imagine where the sun is going to be 3 rounds from now, let alone what trees will have changed sizes or appeared on the board 3 rounds from now that are now going to be casting new shadows at different angles that you weren't aware of when you placed your tree. So a lot of times you just find yourself going, oh, well, there's an open space, seed, because I'm not going to try to figure out if that's going to be a good space 5 rounds from now. I'm just going to put a tree there and get growing because I need to get it all the way up from a seed to a large before I can harvest it. And I'm not going to sit here and try to contemplate where's the best place to do that. Obviously, if you can go closer to the middle because you get more points that way, that's a good idea. But as far as trying to figure out where you're going to accumulate the most light points based off of tree placement with the sun rotation thing, it's just too complicated. And so it sort of takes that technical planning aspect out of the game other than management of your points and leaves it to just, put a tree wherever a tree can fit. So, photosynthesis phase done. Everybody has figured out what they're going to get for light points and added them to their light point tracker by simply moving their marker on the light point tracker. So if I had accumulated 2 light points, which likely I would during the first turn of the game, I'm going to put my little light point tracker on the 2, which is right here. This is not a light point tracker, this is a seed tracker, but I forgot to take one out of the box. So you then move on to the life cycle phase, again, starting with player 1. The life cycle phase is spend your light points, and you can see on your board here what everything costs to do because the board is very well designed. So you can see across the very bottom here, if you want to plant a seed, it costs 1, and it doesn't matter where you want to stick it. What does matter is that it has to be a certain distance from one of your trees based off of the height of your tree, because if you picture a tree, its branches kind of stretch out. Well, if it's only 4 feet off the ground, you can't drop a seed very far, but if it's 40 feet high, you can drop a seed quite a distance away. And so that actually sort of explains how seed placement works. So looking here, it costs 1. If you're planting it next to a small tree, it can only be 1 space off. If it's next to a medium tree, it can be up to 2 spaces off. And if it's next to a large tree, it can be up to 3 spaces off. And you can plant over other trees. So if I have, say, this large tree right here, and there's another, say these trees are just like this, and I own this large green tree right here, I have 3 spaces for planting seeds. Well, 1, 2, 3, I could drop a seed over there, and that's perfectly fine because trees don't block you from dropping seeds. The one thing to keep in mind is that you can't use the same space as a reference twice, and that's sort of true throughout the game. That's one of the weirder mechanics that you kind of have to get your head around. So if I wanted to put a seed here, off of that tree, 3 spaces off of that tree, and I drop my seed down, okay, fine. If I have enough points to keep doing stuff, I can plant another seed. If I have another seed available in my ready to go pile, not on my player mat, but I've already bought it on my player mat and moved it to my ready to go pile. If I have another seed available, I could, in theory, drop another seed anywhere within 3 of that tree, except I've already used that tree this turn. And that's what they mean by you can't use the same space as a reference more than once. However, I've got this tree over here, but now I can only drop it within 1 space of that tree because it's a medium, or this tree here, 2 spaces within that tree. So not referencing the same space, it doesn't come up that often because you've usually got trees scattered all over the place, but it does come up, and it's not just for dropping seeds, it's for other things as well. So you have to keep an eye out for that rule. The other thing that you can spend light points on, like I just mentioned, is moving things from your player mat to your ready-to-go pile. Your ready-to-go pile is where stuff goes to the board. You can't, however, just begin by taking the stuff in your ready-to-go pile. Say, for example, and I realize I have to keep cleaning the board off here to show you these examples, but it's the easiest way to do it. Like I mentioned, everybody starts with a couple of small trees on the board. Say, for example, you go, oh, well, I have a medium tree ready to go. Everybody starts with a medium tree ready to go. And you're likely going to start with 2 solar points because 2 trees at the beginning of the game, they're likely not to be blocked. Okay, so I've got 2 solar points. According to the board, again, lovely little layout right here, you can see that moving from a seed to a small tree costs 1, a small tree to a medium tree costs 2, a medium tree to a large tree costs 3, and then a large tree being harvested costs 4. So looking at that, you go, okay, well, I've got a medium tree on the board, and I've got 2 solar points. Or I should say, I've got a medium tree ready to go. I've got a small tree on the board, and I've got 2 solar points. Why don't I immediately just do the upgrade? Boom. Okay, cool, I'm at a medium tree. Medium trees are better because when you go to score your solar points, a medium tree collects 2 instead of 1, just like a large tree collects 3 instead of 2. So bigger trees are better at collecting light. But the problem is, every time you remove something from the board, it has to go back to your player mat, not your ready-to-go pile. So if you've got your player mat, picture this full of all my trees and seeds, and then you got your ready-to-go stuff on the side here that you've purchased off of your player mat and you've moved into the ready-to-go into the forest pile. If I did this little swap that I was just talking about, the small tree that I took off the board has to go onto my player mat. It doesn't just come over here again, it goes back onto the player mat. Well, at the very beginning of the game, your player mat is full, like I explained. So if you go to pull something off the board and there's nowhere on your player mat to put it, it goes back into the box for the rest of the game, and you've permanently lost that inventory. That's true for trees and seeds. So you can't immediately just start upgrading stuff on the board, because when things go to shuffle back to your player mat, they sort of vanish forever, and that's not good because you're going to slowly reduce the amount of stuff that you can have on the player board at a time because it's all gone back to the box. So first, you need to clear things off of your player mat into your ready-to-go pile so that you have empty spaces here, so that when you then swap stuff out, it has somewhere to go. So it's sort of a stepped process, and it's almost cyclical. A lot of cyclical sort of themes are going on here with the whole life cycle of the trees and everything, but you pretty much have to move something from your mat to your ready to go, and then from your ready to go to the board, and then the thing you remove from the board goes back to your mat. So it's a whole circle thing, which is cool. It's thematic, it works. Once you are done spending whatever light points you want to spend, either moving stuff from your mat to your ready to go or moving from your ready to go to the board, you end your turn and you pass on to the next player, and they're going to do the same thing. Once you've gone all the way around the table, so first player all the way to the player to their right, you're going to take the first player marker and pass it to the person to their left, and they start the new round by moving the sun over one corner on the hex and beginning with the photosynthesis round. Okay, the sun is moved, some trees have probably changed or popped up out of nowhere. What do I get for points now? Again, keeping in mind that a small tree gets you 1, a medium tree gets you 2, and a large tree gets you 3. And shadows are cast the same way, except they're going this way now. So depending on where your trees are placed, and new trees that appeared and trees that changed height, or your trees that changed height and might be poking out from behind one that would have been blocking you, you're going to get a certain number of points, and you mark those points. And then everybody else does that, and you move into the life cycle phase and buy stuff and plant stuff, and that's the whole game, kind of. Once you start actually harvesting trees, when you've gotten a few to their larger size, and you pull them off for points, the points that you get are going to vary based off of the ring that you pulled them from. So the outer ring with 1 leaf, you can get anywhere between, 14 and 12, or I should say 12 and 14 points. The second ring in with 2 leaves, you can get anywhere between 13 and 17 points. The 3-leaf ring, which is almost near the center, gets you anywhere between 17 and 19 points, and that innermost space, just that innermost space with 4 leaves on it, gets you anywhere between 20 and 22 points. And those are stacked, per the rules, from most to least. So as you start harvesting trees, you're going to get more points than you do at the end of the game. And I think that's meant to sort of replicate that as you grow more and more plants in the same soil, the quality of the soil and the nutrients in the soil goes down. And so the quality of the plants growing there goes down. And so as people harvest more and more from the same section, you're going to get fewer points. It's sort of a diminishing return on growing in that area, which again increases the fight to grow in the middle of the forest. Now, there are a few things that we noticed as far as harvesting a tree and immediately planting one. You can almost kind of lock down the space that you want by simply immediately sticking a seed where the tree was. So say, for example, I was lucky enough to get into this middle space. And over the course of the game, I bumped up from say I put a seed there. I bumped up from a seed to a small, and then maybe a couple rounds later from a small to a medium, and then a medium to a large, and finally I harvest that large. Well, it costs 4 points to harvest a large, but at that point in the game, you're probably getting somewhere between 5 and 10, maybe even 15 light points every photosynthesis phase. And so by the time you get to the life cycle phase where you're actually manipulating trees and seeds around the board, I spend 4 points to harvest this. Okay, great. I can put a seed right back there for 1. So if I have a total of 5, I can immediately sort of reserve my space. That's a question that we had that comes back to that. Can you reference or utilize the same space on the board more than once in the same turn? Like I mentioned before, if you're dropping seeds, you can't use this as your reference space for dropping a seed more than once. However, does this count as referencing a space more than once? We couldn't really decide whether or not you could, so we kind of just went with it. It's something you might want to look up on your own. We didn't really have the motivation to at the time. We just kind of wanted to keep playing. But that, like I said, that using the same space for reference more than once is kind of a tricky rule, and I can see how it might confuse some people for what they can and can't do on their turn. But that's pretty much the entire game. Like I said, once the sun makes 3 rotations around the board, you stop, and whoever has the most points on their sort of score tokens at the end of the game wins. You can get some bonus points from light that you have left over that you haven't used. If you look on the mat here, you can see that if you have 3, or at least 3, you get 1 extra point. If you have at least 6, you get 2 extra points. If you have at least 9, 3 extra points, and so on. I don't think any of us scored a lot of points like that at the end of the game. I think somebody got 2. That might have been it. For the most part, I mean, when you're talking about these being worth somewhere between 12 and 22 apiece, you're going to win based off of your actual score tokens. The other nice thing about sort of the economy on the player board is you can see as you go, when you plant from the bottom tree up. And you can see as you go up, even in seeds, they get more expensive. So the first seed that you grab off the board is worth 1, the second is worth 1, but the third is worth 2, and so is the fourth. When you get over here to the large trees, I don't know why I'm trying to stretch my finger here. When you go over here to the large trees, they start at 4 and they go up to 5. And so, much like most games, as you get further into one sort of direction, things get more expensive. And so the economy with the light points is pretty straightforward. It works well, but because of the inability to rotate this shifting 3-dimensional grid of trees in your head forward even a few turns, let alone, a whole rotation of the sun later. It's really hard to be tactical about tree placement. It's even hard to be tactical about which trees you want to increase in size, unless you're just focusing on, okay, the ones in the middle get me more points, so I'm going to focus on the ones in the middle and kind of forget the ones on the outside. If you go about it that way, you'll probably have a better time than trying to figure out that sort of 3-dimensional Tetris piece of the game. And like I said, it's kind of slow. It's not methodical, and it's not plotting because you can't be methodical, and there's not a lot of plotting to be had. But it's relaxed, it's chill, it's mellow. It's sort of like a warm summer's day laying in the grass with a gentle breeze and some pan flute music playing in the background. That's the kind of game that it is. But it's fun, and visually it's very pretty to look at. And so you kind of don't mind the fact that when it's your turn, you kind of just do whatever's simplest because you can't figure anything else out, or at least that's how we were playing. I mean, most of the time you'd have somewhere between 5 and 10 light points, and you'd be like, okay, well, let's see, what do I have available for trees? So I've got a medium tree. Let's swap that in. Okay, I'm running out of open spaces on my playmat because I've been putting a bunch of stuff back as I move things onto the player board. So let me make some space on my player mat. I'll buy one of these. I'll buy 2 of those. Okay, I'm out of points. All right, the next turn. All right, well, what did I buy last turn to open up space on my board? I bought this stuff. All right, well, let's move that out to the actual player board. All right, that moves this stuff back to my player mat. All right, well, next turn, I got to open up some space on my player mat. So it's just kind of like this back and forth, 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of thing. So I guess what I'm getting at is it's not technical and it's not complex, but it's fun and it's relaxing. So if you just want to play a chill board game for a night, it's good. And it's very pretty. So yeah, I would recommend it. I would recommend picking it up. If you're looking for something intense and really crunchy as far as rules go, this isn't going to be it. But if you're looking for something fun, something maybe you can play with younger kids or something you can play with a family who's really not into board games, this would be it. And I don't think it was very expensive to pick up. I want to say it was maybe $30 or $40. And for what you get, I think that's fair because how often do you get 3-dimensional cardboard pieces that resemble beautifully drawn trees? Yeah, but it's a fun game. I would definitely recommend you give it a shot if you get the opportunity. Yeah, other than that, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you haven't yet, go down below and subscribe. Make sure you set your notification bell to all. Otherwise, subscribing doesn't really do anything other than boost my numbers. And I don't want to just boost my numbers. I want you guys to enjoy my videos. If you have time, leave a like or a dislike and maybe a comment. I'll try to comment back if you do. And I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.